In this video, we will be discussing another structuralist, Claude Levi Strauss. He is a person who has lived for a century, literally 100 years, and during this period, he has contributed a lot to both anthropology and structuralism. Let's quickly look into some details about him before we move into his theories. As said earlier, Levi Strauss died when he was 100 years old. He was a French anthropologist to begin with. Because of his great contributions to this field, he is rightly called the father of modern anthropology. Tristus Tropics, also known as Sad Tropics, which was published in 1955, is a well-known anthropological work written by Levi Strauss. It is his memoir in which he wrote about his travels and other anthropological studies. He also included his studies on native tribes of America. Thus, Levi Strauss began as an anthropologist. He taught in France during this time. Later on, Levi Strauss started to teach in America, and this is where he met the famous Roman Jacobson. Jacobson had a great influence on Levi Strauss that Levi Strauss later on turned towards structuralism. Levi Strauss started to apply his new structuralistic ideas into his anthropological studies. So that is a small introduction to Levi Strauss. Let's see his major ideas one by one, and we will begin with his most important study, which is on myths. When we talk about Saussure, the structuralist, the first thing that would come to our mind is his theory on science. The same way, the first thing that you should think about Levi Strauss is about his studies on myths. Because Levi Strauss is known for his analysis of myths. He has analyzed the myth systems of primitive tribes. All these myths that we have heard about have been studied by Levi Strauss. Since, according to him, myths does not lose its original meaning when translated, he tried to translate myths. When you translate a poem or when you translate a novel into another language, the meaning might not be complete. But in the case of myths, the meaning is always complete. There is no meaning lost when it is translated. And Levi Strauss also gives a reason to this. That is, in all myths, in myths of all cultures, there are certain components, certain parts that are always similar. He calls these parts the mythemes. To make this point clearer, let us consider an example. If you look at the movies, whether it is science fiction, adventure, love, romance, or so on, all these movies might have a hero or heroine. Whatever the genre of the movie is, this is a constant or a similar element in all the movies. The same way, mythemes are similar elements present in myths according to Levi Strauss. Let's see what mythemes are in detail. As said earlier, mythemes are constituent unit of myths. It is same as how we see phonemes or morphemes as basic units in structural linguistics. Now, the meaning of each mytheme is derived from its position in the myth, and also by looking into its relation with other mythemes. If we go back to the old example, we are never told directly that this character is the hero or this character is the villain. We analyze the movie, we analyze the structure where the characters are placed in, and we decide the meaning for ourselves. The same happens in myths. The next point is on the structuralist theory of mythology. When we study literature, structuralism is all about language. Levi Strauss applied these theories into myths. That is, he studied myths like language. Saussure had put forward a lot of theories and ideas regarding language. Levi Strauss used these theories and he expanded these ideas into the studies that he made. So basically, the theories of Saussure were applied by Levi Strauss, And where did he apply this? Mainly on his studies on human society, myths, culture, and so on. To make this clear to you, I have included two examples. The first one is Lang and Perrault. Now, this is put forward by Saussure, you might know it. Saussure meant that language has two parts. One is Lang and the other is Perrault. Lang is that part of language which has a formal standardized form. That is the type of language that we use when we write. Parole, on the other hand, depends on speakers and it can vary. Now let's see how Levi Strauss has used this theory while studying myths. As we have seen in the earlier example, all movies will have some characters, some elements that are necessary, which are also recurrent. Likewise, every myth will have some elements that are common, just like Lang. The same way, although there are similarities in myths, there are also diversities and variations in individual myths, and these come under the Perrault section. Now, another example to show how Levi Strauss studied myths like language is again using Saussure's theory of signs. Now, earlier when we studied about Saussure, I had mentioned that the sign gets its meaning based on the structure. The same way, mythemes in myths get their meaning based on the structure too. Moving into the next theory, the binary opposition theory put forward by Levi Strauss. This is a very easy and relevant topic. Binary means two and opposition means contrast. So, binary opposition means two ideas that have completely different contrasting meanings. For example, good versus evil, male versus female, east versus west. Now, if you look at these, one side of the equation is defined according to the differences with the other side of the equation. So, it is a total contrast, and that is why these are examples for binary oppositions. Levi Strauss considers these binary oppositions to be the basis of any kind of narratives, whether it be myths, books, movies, or so on. If you look at the Harry Potter series, for example, the movies or the books are based on good versus evil. And this is what basically this theory is about. Even though there are a lot more ideas that Levi Strauss has put forward, we have only selected 5 major points. So the last one would be kinship. This is a very simple point. That is, just as how the meaning of a word is determined by the structure in which it is placed. For example, oh, you did it. And the next sentence, oh God, not again. In both of this, the word oh has different meanings. The same way, human identity is based on relationships with other humans. I can be a daughter, a sister, a teacher, a student, and so on based on the structure that I am in. And that is what Levi Strauss means by kinship. Finally, to the last slide. Now, as said earlier, Levi Strauss was first an anthropologist and later he was influenced to become a structuralist. So, his ideas were a combination of both these fields, anthropology and structuralism. Structural anthropology is a school of anthropology that is based on Claude Levi Strauss' ideas. And what are these ideas? The first is that unchanging, deep structures exist in all cultures. We already talked about these constant, non-changing elements in every cultures or in every myths. So obviously, all cultural practices have similarities in other cultures. The Savage Mind is a work written by Levi Strauss that comes under the category of structural anthropology. Now that's all for this video. If you have found this video useful, don't forget to subscribe. Mention your comments, suggestions or even doubts in the comment section. Thanks so much for watching.